BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, it seems like the rain has gone away. Yesterday we had a big rainstorm going on during the time of the recording. That always creates a little bit of a kind of background noise, but now everything is bright and sunny, a beautiful October day. And we're going to do something a little bit lighter on this channel. We had been covering a lot of true crime cases and murders, as well as we did our 8-part series on the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. But I think we're going to do something a little bit lighter and look at the flat earth theory. This is something that we started in 2018. We started putting out a few uploads about the flat earth theory, but I think this is the first time in 2019 that we've done something kind of revisiting the question about not only about the shape of our Earth. And I'm really glad that people are no longer saying the Earth is round, because the flat earthers also say that the Earth is round. They just sort of say that it's round like a disc or round like a pie pan. And it's now just like, is the Earth flat or is the Earth shaped like a globe? Globe Earth and flat Earth. And I'm glad that we have some of those things going on. Now, I was watching a video from the channel Jubilee, the show Middle Ground. I highly recommend it, and normally their episodes are like 15 to 20 minutes long, and this thing that they did on the flat earth, like the flat earth versus the globe earthers, I mean, the globe earthers shouldn't become a movement or anything, because then that actually, it's kind of like flat earth versus everybody else, and I think the way they introduced it was flat earthers versus scientists. But, I mean, I would highly recommend watching their episode, and it was 34 minutes, and it's very nice that they were able to give such a large amount of time to a discussion. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I watch debates online, they're often about 1 hour, 2 hours, definitely at least 45 minutes to actually hear everything that people have to say, and that was actually something that one person remarked during this flat earth debate in the video from Jubilee, when she was just saying that, I just want to expand on these points, I haven't said everything that I have to say about this yet. And I think we all feel like that at some point. But the kind of motivation for this one is, do you ever just wish that you could be part of a debate or a discussion or an interview, or you're listening to somebody on the television or on the screen from social media, maybe you're on YouTube on your computer or your smartphone and you're listening to something, and you're like, I wish I was part of that discussion. I wish that I could have jumped in. And this is kind of just what our attempt at that. And if you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below, and let's continue the discussions about the flat earth theory, as well as the kind of more science-based theory about thinking about the globe earth and kind of the more traditional scientific model. But the first question that they asked was the earth created by a higher power? And a lot of people try to invoke something religious when it comes to the flat earth theory. But I would say, though, no matter who you are, was the earth created by a higher power? Yes, whether you are spiritual, non-spiritual, religious, non-religious, you believe in God, or you're just a skeptic and a secular humanist and just going at this from a totally secular viewpoint, yes, of course, the earth was created by a higher power. It would either be that you're going down the religious route, or you're going to be saying something to the effect of nature created itself, or just that it evolved out of a singularity with infinite mass and zero volume. I mean, I can't do that, you can't do that. I mean, there is some sort of higher power in existence, whether you want to call it God, and then other people would probably view that as the laws of nature, the laws of physics. I'm someone who says that the laws of nature are superior to humanity. I mean, or just that nature as a concept is superior to humanity. And I don't think everyone would agree with me on that, but I think the reasons for that are just that nature is a much more all-encompassing concept. I mean, I view nature as the collection and totality of all the processes in existence. I don't entertain anything like the word supernatural. Nothing is above nature. There is only just different forms of existence that we haven't evaluated yet. Okay, so that would be the first thing I would say. It's well, because one of the things they do with the flat earth debate is they really try and look at this from the example of, are you coming at this from a religious, and they mean biblical, Judeo-Christian standpoint, or are you coming at this from a science standpoint? And the flat earth thing, or just talking about nature in general. Nature is not a religious versus science issue. Nature is a nature issue. Nature is just about nature itself. I mean, so says me anyway. That's just one person's take on the subject. I think it's very interesting, though, to have these flat earth conversations, because they actually brought up an interesting question in this debate here on Jubilee about, NASA. Is NASA a trustworthy organization? I think the answer is hands down 100% no. A person can be trustworthy. But an organization, absolutely not. I believe that in any sort of organization of the level of NASA, I mean, when you say organization, do you mean like 3 or 4 people? Maybe you could find 2 people or 3 people in a group that you can trust. But if you have an organization as large as NASA, there's going to be some form of corruption, there's going to be some form of deception, there's going to be some form of maliciousness going on, not to mention power dynamics. There's going to be politics involved with NASA. There are politics involved with the FBI and the ATFE and the FAA. Perhaps people are always trying to fight for promotions and people are just kind of fighting in the power grab. Do you ever notice that as you get older, that the power grab becomes more and more intense? Like people are really fighting to get ahead. You know, it's like it's the white collar Shark Tank lifestyle, and that is definitely going to be present in something like NASA. Just because NASA is trying to explore things that are very fascinating to us, like space exploration. I mean, it's an absolutely brilliant thing, but to get to a certain level, like in administration, you have to fight your way to the top, and there is a certain element of corruption that comes along with that. Do I trust NASA? Absolutely not. Is it because they're a government organization? No. It's because they're a massive organization of any kind. I think any form of structure in our current contemporary sort of thinking paradigm is going to have some form of corruption and is going to have some form of a kind of deception and going on. I wouldn't trust NASA. Plus, you know, I grew up with people like Dave Navarro who told us trust no one. Now, to digress from that one, they brought up like a few more interesting questions related to the whole thing, and was, does the internet influence your standpoint? And all the flat earthers are like, yes, the internet influences their standpoint, and the scientists are saying no. But one of the things we have to say is that the internet gets a very bad reputation for kind of spreading misinformation, spreading disinfo, and these like the kind of like science community would just sort of be like, the flat Earth theory was very minuscule a couple years ago. It has really just exploded into something new, and it has exploded into something in its own right about how people are just convinced that the Earth is flat, and like it's because of the internet. It's because people are sharing kind of like very well put together, very articulate examples about why they think that the Earth is flat, like the Earth is just a pie pan or something like that, and has this kind of like little cone-shaped thing at the bottom. But very interesting that in the flat Earth theory that the bottom side of this quote-unquote pie pan-shaped Earth gets no sunlight at all. It would be just a barren desert, and the sun is very close by and very local. But the thing about this is that I think that the internet is very valuable, though. I don't think people should really discredit the value of something like the internet. Yes, there's lots of garbage on the internet, but there's also there's a lot of truth, actually, that is available online, especially when you're just talking to different people from, like, different perspectives and such. When YouTube came out in 2006, I mean, I immediately just started getting all of my music from YouTube. I learned about so many artists and musicians from YouTube, and it's a very valuable resource for learning about new types of things, and it's a very valuable resource for learning about different types of, well, just sort of how people think, and, like, you get more exposure to things that aren't in your immediate geographic area. That's what the internet is designed for. That's what the internet is all about. It's about learning about things that are not connected to only the people in your own immediate geographic circles. Like the people in your town. That's it. That's all you had before the internet. Maybe you can get a magazine or something, but you can't interact with them the same way. And there really is a certain sense of brilliance in what the internet can do. But at the same time, I mean, there's also, as someone put it, I wish this was my own kind of quote, but they were just saying, there's also a lot of horse shit on YouTube. So, well, there is lots of horse shit on YouTube. I agree to that as well. It's halfway in, halfway out, though, and I don't think we should kind of downplay the good side. I feel the good side of what the internet has in terms of sharing information. Think about how many things on YouTube, though, are studio generated. I mean, I don't know about you, but I use the internet for almost the entirety of my kind of TV watching and movie watching. I mean, I got things like Netflix and Hulu now, and that's all studio generated content that used to be on television, but I use it because of the internet. There's so much studio generated content out there from quote unquote scientists even. I mean, you're going to look at some of their programs. Okay, so that's one thing. But I think that it's also very important to just sort of bear in mind about how the flat earth debate that was going on Jubilee was something where people weren't really interested in changing their minds. They're just like, they were more about arguing the side. And when you're always watching those things, you can make the case that the debate is really for the people at home. The debate is really for the observers. The debate is really for the people who are just trying to figure things out. But that's more done with politics and even religion to a certain extent, because this is kind of science versus an alternative model of science, really. And that's something that we should always bear in mind. Now, like, one final point, though, that is brought up. I mean, I mentioned, like, that there was a woman who was saying that she didn't get to expand upon her points. She said something very profound. She's a flat earther, but she said something very profound when she's like, the scientific community is starting to act a little bit like the church in the days of Martin Luther, when he's, like, kind of protesting that the church is the only ones who can learn Latin. The Bible must only be written in Latin, and only the priests and the clergy can learn Latin, so the people can't know, and then it has to be interpreted through the priests. Scientists are kind of doing that to a certain extent when they are saying that we're the only people who can interpret the cosmos. We're the only people that can interpret science data. If you're not like a scientist like us, if you haven't entered into our own elite circle, like it, if you don't have a PhD in some science-related discipline, then you don't have a say in what's going on with the scientific world. And I mean, on the one hand, I think that on the surface, that's a very, very valuable point. That I mean, they're just kind of discrediting anybody that hasn't gone through the traditional channels of science education. Like, anyone who doesn't have that PhD in physics or biology or chemistry or geology or any other scientific discipline is kind of discredited. But on the other hand, I think that there is some kind of saying, like, how do you certify your education if you're just an independent investigator? And also, how do you certify that you have, like, kind of really found some very credible sources, as opposed to just a bunch of exposure to things that could be intentionally misleading? So, I mean, there's a reason why these people are kind of viewing it this way. And there's another thing to say, though. We're talking about alternative education. What about everything we just said about Martin Luther challenging the church? I mean, if you read, like, some, like, opinions from historians on Martin Luther, some people just sort of say that that is just kind of turned into something more like a folk legend about the way Martin Luther went about things with the 95 Theses. And you can read some of those things online, and, like, you can see that the historians are not in consensus about that. So it's like, it really requires a certain sense of investigation, and where is the real truth? It's like these things become accepted by the general public, and then we don't really have a certain sense of real kind of, like, truth about what actually happened. It's like the folk legend becomes more famous than anything to the contrary. But what do you think about everything? What do you think about anything we've said about the flat Earth debate? And what do you think about the points that any organization as big as NASA is going to be corrupt, and that nature is, like, kind of just nature is something like the higher power? Do you think that, or do you think nature is a higher power? And what do you think about kind of like those who can interpret science? Do you think science is becoming its own elite circle, like scientists rather? Science is not an elite circle, but scientists could be. If you have anything to say at all, drop a comment below, and until next time.